so-called herd immunity, community immunity, will almost assure us of our lives. Why should we go for the lesser protection when we are told that there could be a better protection within months? Maybe in February, maybe in March, we'd have around 67% of our adult population vaccinated. I think you have to wrestle with that issue, Ms. Smith.
Yes, Justice. I think you've raised a lot of important points that many experts are even grappling with at the moment. One of the questions also put to us in this inquiry is to look at the recent by-elections, which it happens on a much smaller scale, but indicates that an election can take place in a safe manner, in a manner that does not pose a substantial risk to the people who partake in it. But with that, there are so many unknown variables. At this point, it would be possible to speculate that October would take place between waves, such as the November by-elections and the May by-elections. However, without certainty of knowing the effects and the severity of the virus at that point, it is difficult to make this conclusion. We also have changed our stance on what we stand on even in the last 24 hours because of the information that has come through, which just indicates the changing nature of this virus. We stand by the fact that a postponement should only happen in very special circumstances, but we do stand by the fact that a postponement, if absolutely necessary, should take place to save the lives of people.
Yeah, and saving lives should really be very special, isn't it?
Yes.
And I have no view yet, but I'm hearing a lot of evidence, as you'd imagine. And at this point, I've read a lot and heard a lot even this morning from these scientists. And it seems to me that if we're to do justice even to our democracy, we have to weigh this quite carefully and say, is it October come hell, come high water? Or is it something in between that would actually spare some lives? And of course, that is the conundrum. It is precisely that. And I thought I would put it to you for us to debate it, that the IEC measures are helpful in containment, but they themselves are uncertain that they would necessarily save lives. And I'm not talking absolute terms, I'm talking relative terms. And that's why they need an additional assessment. So I just thought we would debate that and benefit from your views. And incidentally, no view is hardly absolutely right. That's why it is a conundrum. That's why it is intractable. But please go ahead, you may.
Thank you, Justice. Okay, for the sake of time, I've mentioned this slide, and the only thing I want to kind of draw from it is the fact that the voter turnout in 2019 and late 2020, the voter turnout in those by-elections were comparable, which means that the presence of the epidemic itself did not reduce voter turnout in late 2020. However, as I mentioned, the by-elections which took place in May 2021 had a 10% lower voter turnout than 6 months earlier. However, because of the fact that both of them had taken place between waves of the virus, it is difficult to say that that was the main cause. And there are other things that could have contributed, such as a lack of interest in electing representatives who would only be in power for 6 months.
Yeah, while we're talking about voter turnout, let's debate yet another matter, which is the following. In your view, is a healthy turnout, we can come back to what healthy is a good turnout a component of free and fair elections or not? Let me give you an example.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, you go, I'll listen.
I would say that a healthy turnout would be, in the sense that it shows firstly, possibly the public confidence in people, in government authorities, that the elections were safe. And so they came forward to vote in confidence, not be put in danger as a result of the voting process. But further, I think the CEO mentioned yesterday that the participation of people goes to the heart of an election. And so if you do not have that participation, then the election itself would not be free and fair.
Yes, last week, you remember in Algeria, they had elections. The turnout was miserable. So much so that the party that won agreed to have the elections declared invalid, that they should try again. It was so low that it could hardly be said to be the will of the people. So there is, should I be thinking about that? If you have a spike, say in Delta, or a second wave in October, as some of the evidence suggested, should we say, and you might survive? And what if many of them decide to choose their lives over the elections? Then you have a very low turnout. Is that a reasonable possibility? I mean, is it something that we ought to be guarding against? Or should I consider that when I weigh up this difficult question?
Justice, I'm happy to answer this question, but I just wanted to find out if our legal counsellor, Antoine van Delsen, wanted to possibly jump in here.
Oh, Advocate van Delsen could jump in any point. We've said quite clearly that you could be represented by counsel, and all voices of South Africa are very important. Yes, indeed, I think van Delsen should do so.
Thank you, Judge.
He knows me quite well. I interrupt a lot, so he's used to me being very disruptive. Please go ahead, counsel.
Thank you. I think, and we'll get to this point at the end, but I think I might as well raise it now. I think our basic approach, and I think this might help the conversation, our basic approach is really that if the election in October, if the infection rate is similar to what it was a month or two ago, we don't feel that there is a need to postpone the elections. However, if let's say that the elections are going to take place in 2 weeks from today, then our opinion is different. And the problem that we have is that it's impossible to predict the waves. It's impossible to predict where the Delta variant infection rate is going to be in October. And the only way that one can approach this is to wait to get closer to the time, but to carry, no manner of speaking, a stick in your back pocket. Because if you see that things are not going to work out, that the Delta infection rate is going sky high a week or two before the elections are due to take place, then it's time to postpone them. It's impossible to postpone them now to a different date unless you postpone them indefinitely, which I don't think anybody would want to do. So I hope I'm making sense, but this is the end result of all these factors that we mentioned in the presentation.
Yes, I hear the point. Let's debate one or two of them. Yes, as I've listened to now about 4 experts, and they certainly are uncertain. Our spikes have been cyclic in South Africa, and they've been markedly different in different provinces. And if you went on to go and look at, for instance, Dr. Abdullah's presentations, and the slides are up in our website, it has been cyclic, but this one is higher than all the other 2 that are passed. Yeah. And we're debating with them, where is the sweet spot? When will we have the least threat to life? Because that's what this is about. On the other hand, of course, it's about our democracy. And they struggled, as you rightly would anticipate. And it came down to something that perhaps we should debate, is the safest of the options would be coverage, vaccination coverage. the higher it is, the more near safe all of us would be. Even with infections, we would still be able to fare better. And therefore, if you're looking for a sweet spot, you should be looking for the place where mortality would be least. And they preface this with numbers that are quite impressive numbers when you look at our website. Mortality numbers that are related to the spikes. Many people die. And the significant undercounting of the deaths, those that happen outside of formal institutions. So they're saying what you see is not really what you get. It's much, much more devastation that happens. But the devastation and the number of studies that show it almost quietens to a Peter. So they argue the acid test is how many people die, not how many people. Death comes from the infection. It's a proportion of the infection. So what I'm saying, Mr. Van Dusen, is we have to wrestle with at what point do we say we have to call people out there without feeling guilty about their lives and the safety of their lives. And they suggested, and so I'm putting it to you, that if you get a set coverage, which will be much higher in March than it would be in October, on any scenario, then the mortality would be lower. Let me leave it there. And I'll be very pleased to hear your comment, response.
No, I understand the argument completely. I think the problem I have is that it's impossible to predict how many people are going to be vaccinated in the next 6 months. Or 9 months. One just doesn't know. And coupled with that, you also don't know. It's impossible to predict where the waves are going to be. So you can, I suppose, within the next year, one can pick any date you like, but you are not going to be sure, A, that the vaccination level is going to be acceptable at that date, and B, where the wave is going. You're dealing with two unpredictables, two unknowns.
Well, I'm sorry. You go ahead, please.
No. I think I've made the point.
Minister of Health will be coming. I've asked her to come and tell me. And I've asked other practitioners in civil society who have told me about their predictions of a rollout, whereat it's, given everything else that has happened, the facts and the missteps, if I may use that word also, is around December, probably 25%. And then it goes a little higher and higher. I agree it will be uncertain. So I'm trying to drill deeper to try and understand the most probable scenario. In October, in December, in February, in March. And it seems to me that if the levels can be shown as a projection to be around the 67% that is anticipated, we are told by scientists that the mortality rate would be significantly low.
I can just add one point, that even though, let's assume that those predictions of the vaccination levels for March next year are correct, the problem is that you still don't know where the wave is going to be at that time. And if you look at what is happening in the UK at the moment, where there is a very wide, I forget what the exact level of vaccination is, but it's high. But even there, they are struggling with the Delta variant.
Yes, they have a 50% coverage I had this morning. But the mortality, that's the point. The mortality rate has dropped significantly.
Yeah.
That's why they let people fill up their stadia. It's because the risk of dying has started, and then the hospitals get spared.
Yeah.
Tell us. So the pressure on healthcare suddenly drops because people don't get overly ill.
Yeah.
And those who die, even fewer and fewer and fewer. So you never have a perfect situation, because they tell us that we will have another spike December, January anyway. It might be called something other than Delta. Yeah. And I take the point. But then they say that's hardly the issue. The issue is in global north, the deaths have reduced, but not the infection. Yeah. So that I'm just putting it to yourselves, given the position you've taken in your submissions, to say that is weighing quite a bit with me, and I'm listening, and I want to hear other views so that we get to the right answer.
Yep. No, absolutely. I think the only comment I can make there is that it sounds like a very sensible approach to look at the vaccination rate and the predictions, but one has to be sure that those predictions are actually going to be accurate. And given the unpredictability of the whole COVID pandemic up to now, with various variants and so on, things have never quite panned out as one has expected.
That's true. It's indeed true. We're all treading on on very slippery, path, and I really do. But I hope to get the minister here and say to her, well, how many doses, from where, what kind, for how many, and where will we be in October? We might have 1 million a day. Of course, October might be fine. For me, it's less the date, is more how many deaths can we save. If October is fine and the vaccination is booming, and we get many soldiers and many whoever comes, and we suddenly have millions vaccinated, then we might, there should be no debate about, because the prime thing is to have the democracy protected. There's no debate on that one. The debate is, as we do, will people still live, or will they die? I don't know, are there any closing remarks that you might want to make?
I think if I could just leave it to Sophie, the slide that is in front of you at the moment, I think it is an aspect which people have not focused on, but which I think is very important. And that is that the state of municipal administration and finances is in a very, very seriously bad state. Sophie can just take us through one or two of the figures, and these are based on a presentation made by the Auditor General last week in Parliament. And within this context, I think the municipal elections are very important. And this is an added context that my submission would be that one needs to keep in mind.
Oh, yes, and I'm with you there entirely. I'm yet to find somebody who presents and doesn't point to this. And the threat of a bit of new wine in old bottles. People worried about new funds flowing after the financial year in April, and finding councillors of this kind. So I do take the point, and one would be probing there and said, when does the fresh money flow? In other words, when is there a new injection of money to councils? And that might influence when you want to hold your elections. Because the debates have always been there that, as I said, where's the sweet spot? Is it May? Is it February? Is it October? Is it March? And this should surely into that consideration. And you'd like to have new councillors in new places when you hopefully have new money, and that might improve our lot collectively. So this is an important slide, and I note its contents. I know it's from my end. That's about it. What remains is to thank you, enormously for the submissions. The whole day tomorrow we'll be having other submissions, and the principal will be from political parties, and who will be really, who have made up their minds in their submissions, but we should still remain, you're a civil society entity, we should still remain open to the idea of weighing up the issues quite carefully in order to arrive at an answer that best will suit our country.
Absolutely. I think the point is that there is no perfect solution, if I can make that point.
That is true. That is a fair submission. It is so. Thank you ever so much. I've had full hearings from 9 a.m. this morning. It's about time to go and try and put up my feet or something. I might go and watch a bit of soccer maybe, or something like that. But you have a good evening. I wish you well too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Justice.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.